Hi, good morning or evening, depending on where you're at right now. John and I are both in London. Thanks for joining us. Just so you know, we will be sharing the deck after the event, and it's also going to be recorded. So we'll be sharing that around after the event. So no sweat there. All of those insights that you just have to get in your inbox, they will be there. And there will also be a Q&A at the end. So any burning questions or things you want us to elaborate on, keep your eyes peeled for the chat box, which should be lurking around your screen somewhere. And yeah, you should be able to give us some questions that we should have around kind of 10 minutes at the end to answer. So just to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know, I am Laura Oxford, Global Head of Cultural Insights here at We Are Social. So I work across our global network, 15 offices across 13 markets. I work with brands from Adidas to Activision to Guinness, basically supporting them in driving cultural impact through cultural research. So that's me.
Yeah, hi guys, my name's John Crozier. I'm a Business Development Director here at We Are Social, been here for about 9 years. Over that time I've worked on a whole host of sporting accounts, but also in the gaming sector, so running the PlayStation account, and I've also worked a lot on the Call of Duty account, about 2 years there. My responsibilities here is basically a bit of client services, bit of new business. And yeah, I'll be helping along with this presentation and look forward to taking you through it.
So Game On is the latest addition to our public-facing research and thought leadership. This is a big part of my role and what I help the company put together, everything from our Think Forward annual report through to our more kind of tactical, responsive work that we did in relation to the pandemic last year, and now this. And all of this work goes in supporting some of our incredible roster of global clients, all of which are outlined here, or some of which. But in 2021, gaming is the world's biggest social platform. Data from our most recent Global Digital Report showed that 87% of global internet users globally say that they identify as gamers, and that amounts to about 4 billion people globally. And so this is a platform for not just for gaming, but for engaging with some of the world's biggest stars, as I'm sure you'll all remember Travis Scott's iconic Fortnite performance last year. It's a place for learning about important issues, everything from environmentalism through to anti-racism. And it's a platform for supporting our fellow human beings. This was a Pride activation that we did in our Singapore office in Animal Crossing last year. And so all of these different evolutions of the gaming space made us feel like there were more now than ever. There are a ton of commercial opportunities for non-gaming brands, as well as gaming brands, to really participate in these platforms as social platforms in their own right. And so this series is all about kind of unearthing and getting under the skin of some of the most exciting opportunities and kind of most easy to get into opportunities for non-gaming brands. And the focus will be on live streaming, esports, and in-game integrations, everything from in-game items to in-game events. But as I'm sure you're all aware, today is about live streaming. We didn't pull this together, just John and I. We had an amazing team of collaborators to support us. Obviously, We Are Social boasts a team of over 800 social experts worldwide. But part of my role is also to look after our social spotting network, which is a core group of collaborators, one per office, whose kind of collective brain ensures that we're really keeping on top of culture at a global scale without losing that local nuance. So we had that as an initial input. And then on top of that, we spoke to some really incredible people who are experts in this field. Firstly, the amazing TL Taylor, who's a sociologist and has over 20 years worth of research and experience specifically working in live streaming and esports. She wrote an amazing book called Watch Me Play, which informed this research. And then on top of that, from a more commercial perspective, we spoke to our very own Fabien Gaetan, who is head of gaming and social entertainment at We Are Social France. And Fabien's input really kind of helps us understand, where the biggest opportunities are for brands moving forwards. So just to start at the very beginning, what we mean when we say live streaming. So live streaming broadly is a live transmission of any event over the internet, obviously something which has really grown a lot in the past year. But specifically for this piece of work, we're talking about live streaming in the context of digital gaming, the phenomenon in which people record themselves playing games to a live audience. It's a massive platform that presents really big opportunities, especially in the wake of the past year. We've seen that 41% of global 16 to 24s watched a live stream in the past month. And as of this year, the net worth of Twitch is 5 billion. So some really big numbers and a lot of like cash in this space as well. It is worth noting that the audience for live streaming right now is less broad than gaming overall. We obviously spoke at the beginning about the fact that, you know, 4 billion people globally identify as gamers. But when you look specifically at live streaming, 65% of people who talked about watching gaming live streams in the past 6 months globally were male. So it is still very much this kind of currently this younger male audience that we're seeing in live streaming. But its cultural footprint is growing in leaps and bounds. Amazing example of this is Doja Cat tweeting earlier this year, "Fuck it, I'm getting on Twitch," which was received super well by a ton of different streamers. She's actually only streamed like 3 or 4 times, but it's something that is a really big part of her persona, and she's already got over 200,000 followers. And her kind of getting onto the platform is a real like kind of shift in terms of the type of creators we might expect people to flock to platforms like Twitch for. And part of this is obviously driven by the past year. In 2020, live streaming has become a temporary host for displaced events. So not just Travis Scott and his Fortnite concert, but also NASCAR moved its entire season online via iRacing, so it could until it could resume traditional races. We saw it become a space for really intimate fan interactions, sports stars, politicians, musicians like Charlie XCX and Drake. Tons of people were getting online in the absence of live shows to be able to kind of engage with their fans more directly. And it's also become a platform for political issues. So we saw a ton of BLM protests were streamed live on Twitch daily back last summer. And then we've also seen AOC make headlines for a voter registration themed Among Us broadcast. So there have been tons of reasons for Twitch to kind of, and other live streaming platforms to really kind of come into the fore in the past year. But while IRL experiences are back in session, the mass uptake of live streaming is really just getting started. And so that's really the setup for this research and why we wanted to kind of explore this a little bit further. So what you'll see today is an outline of where you'll start, you know, the titles, the platforms, the basics, the stuff you need to know, a little bit more about what creators you need to know about, the different types of creators that are out there and what kind of real audience needs that they kind of tap into. And then lastly, where the biggest opportunities are for brands, of course, the golden question. So yeah, I'm going to pass over to John.
Thanks, Laura. So yeah, we wanted to sort of start off by doing the basics, as Laura said. So firstly, we wanted to talk about the kind of games that people are watching. So one of the first quotes we pulled out from our interview with TL Taylor is this quote, which is basically one of the most powerful things about live streaming is that it has heterogeneity. And what we mean by that is it's not just one homogeneous blob. There is no one size fits all answer for this, and it's very important to think about your audience in that way, because people's personalities and the games they play are vary wildly and are very different. And you know, in terms of the games that people are watching, this is the same basically. There's multiple different versions of types of games that people are playing, from strategy games to zombie horrors, or even like crazy simulators like Goose Simulators. So each game can have a different artistic approach, different immersive behavior, narrative structure, gameplay, or even strategy. So it's really important to try and understand that when you're thinking about the people you're talking to. And even within the types of games, they can vary very wildly. So the reason that people actually engage and watch these games on these live streams is because they have a really broad range of emotional experiences, and all of them are core to the experiences that they have with their streamers. So we're going to sort of break down the types of games and really why people want to watch those. The first one we're going to look at is strategy games. So strategy games really focused on decision-making, skillful decision-making and planning to achieve victory. So chess, obviously a classic strategy game that is a hugely popular game, and actually recently has become very popular on Twitch, people watching grandmasters play each other, etc. But also classic games like Civilization or Command and Conquer. And the reason that people like watching these kind of streams is because it helps the viewers improve on their own game, or can actually have this kind of pleasure of it, seeing an expert nail it. It's that kind of perfect play reward of watching really good streamers in this world. The second one is MMOs. So these are massively multiplayer online games. So just to explain that a little bit, these titles allow large numbers of players to participate at the same time in the same open world. And it can be quite varied in terms of gameplay. So it could be a role play or it could be a first-person shooter, but they usually take place in one consistent universe. And that universe can actually change and adapt over time without the players actually being there. So one of the things that is very popular with these types of games is that they can be modded, which is effectively, they can be altered. The world, the universe can be altered and adapted by the communities that are playing them. We've seen really a huge increase in the interest around GTA 5 recently because of that. They've got GTA 5 roleplay, and that's allowed a lot of people to mod and adapt the gameplay. So we'll talk a little bit about that in more detail later. But why people enjoy watching these games is because it gives gamers this sort of immersive and this highly social landscape in which they can build connections with other people. Always about social interaction, the streaming and gaming, but it also helps people to co-create stories and explore. So the next game, probably the most famous in terms of streaming, or probably from the last year or two certainly, is Battle Royale. So popularised by PUBG and Fortnite initially, this seen teams or individuals fight to the death to see who's the last man standing, usually 100 to 150 people. And they're really kind of an evolution from those multiplayer first-person shooter formats from previous games, so Team Deathmatch in COD, or even if you go back far enough, GoldenEye multiplayer. And really the reason why people watch these types of streams is because it gives people a hit of that competition element that favours skill, and it is slightly different to sort of the other games that are long haul grinds, bit of a gamer term then, but effectively it appeals to both casual and really hardcore gamers because it has that kind of skill, fun, short period of time as opposed to long haul gaming. And then the next one is creation games. So these are effectively sandbox creation games. They effectively allow users to collect resources and then build whatever their minds can come up with within the game. And they can collaborate with other people and build basically anything that they can come up with. So this is a hugely popular format on YouTube, very popular with a younger audience. And the reason why people like watching these streams, because it gives them an immersive and seemingly infinite world to test the boundaries of. And then the next one, hype games. So these are really zeitgeist games. They're not necessarily part of the core gaming culture world. Often they're indie games, but they have this kind of cultural currency. They get a bit of a wave of popularity behind them, and then they become a really popular thing for people to watch online. Perfect example of this would be the AOC stream of Among Us that Law mentioned earlier, but also the huge number of people that were tuning in to play Fall Guys when it came out last year. So the reason why people do this, again, is that social element. They want people to be feeling like they're part of something bigger, to be part of an in-joke or a movement, and that's a very common thing within this gaming community. And then the final game or game type, which I really like, a quote that we had when we spoke to TL was these tending games, and the quote that she said was "gaming is gardening." Now that phrase to me is really interesting because it's quite different to the normal type of perception of gaming, that it's frenetic, it's violent, it's fast, and these games are really about looking after and building and cultivating the world that you're living in, and there's no time pressure in these games, so it's quite a different approach to a type of game. And popular games here would be Animal Crossing or Farmville, and really the reason why people like watching these streams or playing these games is because it's kind of an exercise in mindfulness, and kind of a soothing antidote to the chaos of reality. So you can see there's a wide range of different titles there, or types of games. And when we looked at the numbers of the sort of hours that are being watched, that diversity is really reflected across the top three streaming platforms, so Twitch, YouTube gaming, and Facebook gaming. But when you look at it, it's actually very diverse. So you've got MMOs, you've got battle royales, you've got creation games, and even mobile battle royales there. So there's a very wide range of people watching games, and they're all watching games for different reasons. But the next thing you need to know about streaming is obviously where are people actually going to watch these streams. So obviously you've probably heard of Twitch. It definitely is the industry incumbent with about 70% of the market. One of the reasons for that is that Twitch is very much built from the gamer community outwards. And that's very clear in terms of its platform functionality. So these platform functionalities that are built into the service that they offer are very much about giving gamers unique benefits to how they experience the game and how their communities can experience the streams. So, for example, squad streams legitimizes gaming as a spectator sport, so you can have multiple people all engaging with the same stream at the same time. Channel points incentivizes loyalty and interaction. Channel points is effectively a reward system. So if you watch a certain streamer over and over again, you get channel points against that streamer, which can be redeemed for certain things. And then extensions, maximizing creativity and innovation. So Twitch extensions are effectively the same as a browser extension. You can create a little bit of code which you can add onto your stream, which gives another level of sort of interaction or creativity that you can lay onto your stream. And that's something that is pretty cool, because modding, hacking is very key and core to the part of the sort of gamer culture that is fundamental to streaming. And when you think about this platform in terms of its culture, it's very much about the gaming community first, and Fabian's quote here really sums up really nicely. So the culture on Twitch is what makes it different. It's very distinctive. It's defined by this OG gamer culture that makes it feel like watching with like-minded others, and that's really important to the success of the platform, because it's tapped into the community's needs, desires, and wants. But obviously, we're not getting away from the fact the major platforms are beginning to move in. So there were 3 billion hours of gaming streamed on Facebook in 2020, which I think was a double of what they had in 2019. And there was 6 billion hours of games streamed on YouTube in 2020, again, which was doubled at least. And it's quite interesting because these platforms have the mass that they're trying to bring people to, as opposed to building from the community outwards. And you might think that on the surface there isn't really much to differentiate the platforms, but if I take you back to the slide with the hours of the most streamed games, there are some slight differences which we think tell us something interesting. So GTA at the top there is across all of the platforms, but then you have sort of League of Legends, Call of Duty, Fortnite on Twitch being the most streamed. For YouTube gaming, it was very much Roblox and Minecraft, and then for Facebook gaming, you've got sort of Garena Free Fire, which is a mobile battle royale, and PUBG Mobile. So if you look at that, it can give you kind of a bit of an inference about what these cultures on these platforms are about. So for Twitch, it's the heartland of that OG gamer culture. For YouTube gaming, it's more about fostering creativity through gaming, so allowing people to explore and express themselves. And then for Facebook gaming, it's much more about offering accessibility for casual gamers, which is why you see those mobile gaming platforms being really popular on those platforms. And then obviously, these are the big guys. There are a whole host of other emergent platforms out there, and they all have a kind of different angle on what makes their platform different for their community. So Mobcast was much more about mobile casting for desktop. Owncast is about taking back control from large-scale corporations and having a sort of an open source platform. And then DLive has quite lax content guidelines and is very popular within niche social groups. And it was actually really popular around people live casting from the assault on the Capitol last year. So each of these sort of indicate that there are different needs that different platforms are trying to support. And obviously having this base level platform knowledge is really important, but for streamers, very much along the same way as different art forms, film, music, etc., the creators are the beating heart of the community in streaming. I'm going to hand back to Laura, who will talk you through some of the sort of basics around streamers and the kind of work that they do.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, in terms of the creators that we need to know about, when we look at live streaming as a whole, there's an amazing quote from Fabian here saying, without the comments, there is no content. What that really means is that these streams are really pushed forward by the chat box, whether it be on Twitch, whether it be on Facebook gaming, whether it be on any of those emerging platforms. It's really pushed forward through the interaction that streamers have, and that's what makes it exciting and means that people will, clock in and watch a stream for an hour and a half. And so in a space that's dictated by interactivity, of course, it makes sense that the most powerful and engaged communities are not formed necessarily around the titles, not necessarily formed around the platforms, but but more around who is playing those titles on those platforms. So what we really wanted to understand is what creators are defining the space and driving it forwards, and what audience motivations are they really tapping into that help us understand why streaming is so appealing and so engaging. And I love a 2x2, so you're about to see a map, which is my fave, but we've mapped this kind of rich and diverse tapestry across 2 key axes. So firstly, we have what they play. So this is really interesting. When we saw it, we were like, oh, well, some people play, you know, just one game, and they might, you know, dabble in others, but broadly speaking, just play League of Legends, just play Fortnite, whatever. And then some play a wide variety of games. Turns out variety streamers is in fact like the term to use to describe these streamers who are kind of known for having a very rich and complex and diverse kind of gameplay experience on their stream. And then the second axis that we spoke about is why they play. So some people, their job is literally, you know, professionally and esports stars. Of course, all of the creators that we're talking about here are technically working in gaming, but for some of them, it's about the professionalism, it's about the expertise. And then for some, people go to them for their, you know, for their relatability, their approachability. They're almost like amateur approach to gaming, in which they feel like, you know, a mate or someone who just loves games the way fans do. And so this broadly maps out into 4 key types of creators. There's specialists, so these are streamers who are known for being highly skilled in a specific game or genre. This is, you know, like the professional esports stars, for example. Critics, so these are streamers who are known for their industry expertise and general knowledge of gaming. These are people that viewers will go to in order to get guidance on, you know, the next game to play or general industry knowledge. Entertainers, so again, obviously, of course, technically these are all entertainers, but these are the kind of hard and fast, almost the closest to like a social media influencer, streamers who are known for their personality and their love of gaming, who play a wide range of games. And then finally, super fans. So these are streamers who are known for their deep enjoyment of a specific game or a genre. So they are like the archetypal fan who specifically just loves Minecraft or just loves one title. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to look at specialists first. We're going to give you a couple of examples, a bit of a reason why people watch them, and then a bit of a summary from a quote from TL for each of these segments. So specialists, as Laura mentioned, you know, these guys are the elite, globally renowned sports stars effectively in their fields. They're pros, and they really only focus in one title. So the fans know what they're watching them for, and they want to go and see that elite level gameplay on their stream. So 2 examples here: Kitty plays a Fortnite gamer and streamer, and TSM Bergsen, again, probably one of the best League of Legends players in the world, and definitely League of Legends is probably one of the most watched esports tournaments in the world. So in terms of why their audiences go to watch those games, we're kind of going to give 3 reasons for each of these segmentations. So the first one is the crowd experience. And what we mean by that is there's the fandom of enjoying and watching a streamer together with other fans of that person, that gameplay. And that's specifically the case when you have a look at professional gamers or people who are playing in that esports sector. The second is this sort of artistic desire to watch the perfect play. Watching perfect play in any game is always really impressive, and it's something that really drives a lot of interest and intrigue. It drives a lot of traffic on social media. You'll see sort of, you know, lots of rundowns of the best plays when you're looking at gaming socials, etc. And then hacks and tips. Obviously, if you're watching the best people in the world, you're going to pick up some information and ideas around how to play those games really well. And then in terms of a quote that surmises that, we thought this was really nice from TL. So sometimes you watch a stream because you're participating in a huge event, like a sporting event. In esports live streams, it's the collective crowd experience that's appealing. So really tapping into that sort of fandom, that crowd experience for these specialists. The next sector we wanted to talk about is critics. So these guys are sort of the people who break it down for you. You know, they make you understand what makes a game good, what makes it frustrating, the hacks that can get you through the best level. And they are effectively pros that provide a reliable opinion across different genres. So obviously we talked about the specialists, and they're the ones who play single titles. These guys are, very good at a multitude of different games, and they give that broad spectrum of what games are out there and what games are good. So 2 examples here: Nightly 3, who does these sort of really deep, in-depth guides for games, patch note reviews, highlights, and speculates on, titles that are coming out. And then a really interesting one, Cypher, who basically founded a non-for-profit group called I Need Diverse Games, and she effectively reviews games to analyze and critique the identity and culture that's in those games, to give it a more of a intersectionality perspective on those games and how they're sort of portraying different races in computer games. So very interesting. And then why do people go and watch these people's streams? So obviously there's that element of industry knowledge. If you're a huge fan of gaming, you're going to want to know what's going on. You're going to want to understand how society is impacting the industry, and also understand, what technological advances, etc., are happening. There's an element of discovery, finding out about new games, what should I be playing, etc., and referrals. Basically looking to these people for advice, for guidance on what's a useful spend of my time and money. And then a good quote here from TL again, which just surmises that. So people often watch streams to learn about the game. The underlying gambit for streaming from developers' perspectives has for a long time been that it's great free marketing. So obviously, if you were talking about films or if you were talking about music, you wouldn't necessarily let your IP be streamed for free. But in this instance, gameplay and having that out there in the world is really important for people to understand and want to engage with and learn about games to help drive their purchase decision, basically. So the next one is effectively the closest thing that we have to traditional gamers. So we're looking at entertainers here, and these people are variety streamers. They don't necessarily play just one title, and they basically build a relationship with their audiences through their personality. They draw people in based on their sort of almost gaming with a friend kind of relatable nature to their game. So we've got 2 examples here. So Annoying and Valkyrie, both big YouTubers in their own right, but Valkyrie, I think, was the most streamed female on YouTube in 2021. And the reason that people watch these, so there's a couple here: parasocial fandom. So just a quick explanation of what that is. That's effectively having this sort of fandom of a personality, which is very common with actors or TV characters. And this is kind of why people have that. They have an expectation of what this person's like. They understand their personality. They go to watch it because they really enjoy spending time with that person and that personality through this media. Then there's this kind of really lovely idea of ambient sociality, which we were introduced to by TL, which is effectively that sort of familiar feeling of having the radio or the TV on in the background, something that you really can engage with and understand and just have on as background entertainment. And then finally, they're entertainers. Their streams are entertaining fundamentally. People go there to enjoy and watch and be entertained. And then a quote from TL again: sometimes you watch a stream because you love the broadcaster as an entertainer. It's the specificity of seeing them play that's fun. So the final one, which is super fans. So as Law mentioned, these are the guys who just play one game. So they're not pros. They do it as a fan of the game, and it's sort of that playing with friends kind of experience. But if these guys or these games had a fan club, these guys would be the #1 leaders of that. And really, they do this because they have a love and adoration of a single title. So 2 examples here: Little Simsy, who's a Sims YouTuber, and Tommy Innit, who's an absolutely huge Minecraft streamer, 9 million followers on YouTube. He's really big in that scene. And in terms of why people go and watch these streams, there's obviously this element of shared fandom. I think streaming has this amazing ability to bring fans together. And anytime you have a subculture, having that connection with other people from anywhere in the world and having a shared experience is really important to defining and growing that sort of fandom and culture. Secondly, again, that ambient sociality of that entertainment that can be on in the background that's familiar. And finally, hacks and tips. These people are incredibly good at these games. They're not doing it for a pro level, but they are certainly doing it from a really deep knowledge of the game. And having that gives viewers these abilities to sort of pick up hacks and tips. So yeah, we've covered quite a lot there. So if you do have any Q&A, pop them in the Q&A box in the bottom. And then a final quote from TL just on those super fans. Very often watching a stream is about participating in your own fandom, finding other people who love the thing you love, whether it's a specific franchise or a type of cosplay. So really tapping into that kind of subculture again.
Nice. Yeah, so as John mentioned, tons in here, a lot to digest. But yes, so we've got specialists, just a quick recap, who are, you know, amazing for this crowd experience, for this perfect play. We've got critics who really kind of support audiences in terms of discovery and game understanding. Entertainers who provide this kind of celebrity-esque interaction and a kind of ambient sociality, and then super fans who really kind of make you feel like you're in the fandom with them. So these kind of four quadrants are kind of the bread and butter of the category, and really kind of summarize some of the kind of main reasons that audiences are going to this. I think it's worth noting as well, TL's quotes throughout all of the book that she wrote, quite a lot was about interviewing hundreds and hundreds of streamers and viewers to find out why they're actually going to these channels. So these motivations are kind of backed by lots of historic research as well. So, but all of this leads into the biggest opportunities. I'm sure you've already kind of picked up over the course of this presentation, there have been a ton of kind of emergent themes that kept coming through for us when we were exploring and understanding this space. And so we wanted to surface some of the biggest opportunities for brands in and beyond the gaming space as well. We felt like the opportunities kind of, some of them felt different to the others, and we've kind of broken them out into these two categories. We've got cultural truths. These are truisms of live streaming culture and gaming culture that really underpin the joy of gaming and the joy of engaging with streamers. And then there are cultural tensions. So these are more emergent value systems. As live streaming becomes more mainstream, obviously the audience is diversifying, and it's creating some friction and some tension and kind of disrupting some of the established norms, putting pressure on them to create, you know, kind of new ways to serve underserved expectations. And so strategically, you can really think about, you know, which of these is right for your brand. Cultural truths tend to create relevance among core gaming audiences. They're a great starting point for entering this space. They're ideal for more kind of risk-averse brands who don't want to, you know, kind of ruffle any feathers in the gaming space just yet, but just want to kind of do something to kind of build resonance. And there are tons of untapped opportunities for non-gaming brands in the cultural truth space. I do think that if you are a gaming brand, there's a high likelihood that, you know, you're probably already tapping into some of these cultural truths, or should be. So these are kind of less relevant for brands that are already in the gaming space. Then beyond that, we've got cultural tensions. So these are more progressive and more disruptive. They speak to broader audiences. So for example, what we learned in our research was that actually female gamers from BIPOC communities, LGBTQ plus streamers, and gamers, a lot of these audiences are still extremely underserved. And this kind of really speaks to more casual gamers as well beyond that, because if you know, as a person, you are maybe a casual gamer, but you value diversity and inclusivity, for example, then of course, there's more of an opportunity to resonate with these core gamer audiences, but then beyond as well. They're less suitable for risk-averse brands who maybe don't want to cause any controversy in the space. But they provide, because there's so many untapped opportunities here, they provide some really interesting ways in, not just for brands beyond gaming, but for brands actually in gaming as well, which you'll see when I go through them. So let's start with the cultural truths. So these are truisms of live streaming culture that underpin the joy of gaming. First up, I'm sure you will have picked up on this already, but interaction with streamers is the bread and butter of a successful stream. So TL says, people have long been experimenting with audience interaction, and this is continuing to grow. And I think this is what's so interesting about the space. It's that streamers are constantly finding ways to level up what that interaction actually looks like. And there are many different ways that you can do that. Great example of kind of where we see this happening in broader culture is, you know, Pokimane has taken to reading her fan letters live, and it really kind of indicates like the centralization of that interaction between communities. Pokimane is also one of these entertainer streamers, and so it's really interesting that even she, with these parasocial relationships, is really kind of putting her fandom center stage. In terms of where we're seeing this, more broadly, a couple of great examples. We've got sleep streaming. So sleep streaming is a really big phenomenon in the last couple of years, where streamers would essentially put their live streams on, go to sleep, and there is a function on Twitch where you can pay a couple of dollars or a couple of pounds to stream a video in that stream. And the idea is that the people who are watching have to try and wake up the streamer while they sleep. So there's a load of interaction which is going on the chat as people kind of make jokes between each other. But then obviously the ultimate interaction is if you actually manage to wake up the streamer. So a great example of this kind of innovative interaction. Then you have French streamer Jiraya. If you remember before, John mentioned that there's something on Twitch called channel points, which kind of incentivizes loyalty and lets viewers gather points. Jiraya has just released a game that you can only play and participate in if you have enough points from his channel. So another great example of incentivizing interaction there. In terms of brands that get it, I couldn't find a better example. Like, this is honestly just the best example that I could find. KFC Spain participating in Marbella Vice. So I'm going to try and explain to you now what GTA 5 is. It is quite complex to understand if you don't have a lot of visibility on the gaming. So feel free to ask any questions at the end if you need to. But basically, the way GTA 5 roleplay works is fans set up their own servers. And then all the people who participate essentially play different roles, almost like an interactive soap opera. So you get your character, you can decide to be like a police officer, and you can do whatever you want in the game. So Marbella Vice is a really famous one in Spain, which is essentially all of the characters are played by famous influencers, famous footballers, famous Spanish celebrities. And KFC Spain managed to get Colonel Sanders a supporting role on Marbella Vice, where he essentially role plays in 150, I think over 150 storylines he's participating in, all of which involve interactions with these other celebrities and influencers in the space. So it's a really amazing example of how brand has really picked up on how to participate in this interactivity in a really amazing way. Second cultural truth, just like live sports, many compelling live streams are about the spectacle of skill. I think John kind of paraphrased some of this quote earlier, but there's something about the draw of watching expert or beautiful play. It's a motivation that would be recognized by sports fans or music fans too. Expert players often create moves or strategies that are transformative for fans, and nothing kind of more expressly like brings this to life as much as the rise of chess.com, but in particularly the fact that Hikaru Nakamura, who is the current grandmaster globally of chess, he is one of the most famous Twitch streamers under GM Hikaru. And the whole point is that watching him play is so compelling because he is just so good at the game. So great example of that. Where else we're seeing it, speed running, which is basically where you try and complete a level as quickly as possible, is a massive phenomenon in gaming. In particular, recently, a streamer called Unnamed made headlines in a lot of kind of gaming media for completing the whole single player storyline of GTA 5 in 9 hours without taking a single bullet throughout the game. On the flip side of this, we've also recently seen the rise of easy mode shaming. Ashley Roboto, who's pictured here, released a public statement saying that she was sick of being essentially bullied by her fandom and by people who are watching her streams because they felt that she wasn't demonstrating enough skill on her channel. So, you know, two sides of the coin there in which you can see that the spectacle of skill is really what streamers are and what viewers are going to streams for. And that creates a really interesting opportunity for a brand. So this no build challenge in Fortnite, which was a WWF campaign created actually by Fabian in France and his team. And for those of you that don't know, Fortnite is, but the kind of premise of the game is that you have to chop down trees and then build forts and kind of build, John, what's the right word that I'm thinking of here? It's not a fort.
No, it's basically you build protection using the resources in the game.
Yes, exactly. So for WWF, they were like, okay, well, let's like not chop down any trees in the game. So it's a great insight, which kind of links back obviously to the main values of the brand. But more importantly than that, it made the game really hard to play. Like, it's really hard to play if you don't cut down any trees. And so that made the streams that came off of it really, really interesting and compelling and exciting, which is why it was such an amazing activation that really tapped into a very true insight of this space. And lastly, in cultural truths, one which is a little bit stressful for a lot of brands, core gamer audience are champions of the underdog. Gamers are ruthless when it comes to corporate involvement, says TL. They take it down without hesitation. It's one of the reasons many brands have been hesitant to get into a space like streaming. It's not a controlled media space. And live streamers will always feel accountable to their audiences in ways that they will never feel accountable to an advertiser. And nothing really kind of exemplifies this more astutely than the GameStop stock saga. So many streamers were involved in that, and it was all about GameStop being an underdog. So many streamers were involved. It invoked a lot of conversation in Twitch streams and streams on YouTube and Facebook during the time that it was happening. So it's really the perfect example of where we've seen this play out. Elsewhere, there are tons of different ways that this plays out, some of which are very kind of anti-corporate and some of which are actually much more kind of manageable and interesting and kind of actionable for brands. So Twitch being bought by Amazon created a real rift in the gaming community, as I'm sure you can imagine, given this insight. And there was recently a really big streamer revolt after Twitch ran some anti-union ads via Amazon. So that's, how that's playing out in the kind of bleakest way and the kind of hardest way for brands to really deal with. But then on the flip side, there are some kind of other ways that this is playing out in terms of the features and the experience of gameplay, which actually kind of are more actionable. So there's the feature of raiding on Twitch essentially means that big streamers can take all of the people who are watching their stream and raid a smaller streamer's channel. And the whole point is to kind of, champion the underdog, give them more visibility, give their audience a reason to discover someone new. And this is really, really common. And so this function actually informed another activation that we did here in the UK with Uber Eats, in which we partnered with a ton of different really, really big streamers and then got them to raid channels that had 0 viewers. It gave them some free food, gave them a massive audience, gave them a really exciting and serendipitous moment. And that really, really taps into this kind of underdog mentality that we see. So that is the cultural truths. Then we move on to the cultural tensions. So these are the emergent value systems that are disrupting established norms, creating new and often underserved expectations. And as I mentioned before, what we realized here is that they really are underserved and there's a ton of opportunity to play here. So first up, we have the core streaming audience is open-minded, but it's not always inclusive. So identity as content, says TL. Finding your folks on live streaming platforms is really, really important. And identity as content is actually the tagline of a very new service which has recently emerged called Peer-to-Peer Live, which we have depicted here alongside one of its co-founders, Ferociously Steph. So Twitch, in terms of how you search for streamers, doesn't actually have a ton of super specific identity-based tagging. And so that's what Peer-to-Peer Live intends to do. It basically is a directory where all of the streamers on Twitch have been tagged in terms of gender identity, sexuality, race and ethnicity, and a ton of other different identity tags, which basically are now marginalized streamers and viewers to be able to find other people like them. And this comes off the back of the fact that Twitch does have a broad LGBTQIA+ tag already, which kind of does a catch-all for the queer community. But there is no way for trans viewers to find trans streamers, for example. And trans communities who spend a lot of time on Twitch have actually spent the last 2 years campaigning for Twitch to change this. And it hasn't yet happened, which is why Peer-to-Peer Live took it into their own hands to do it themselves. And there are a ton of other ways that this is playing out in gamer culture. John mentioned modding earlier in terms of, being able to kind of alter certain aspects of the game. On The Sims, it's really easy for players to download mods made by other audiences. And Ebonics is one of a number of startups, essentially, which literally creates inclusive mods. So this particular one is all about, black hair, and other features kind of being more accessible in The Sims. Then you have the Cookout Fam, which is run by the excellent Denny Von Doom, who's pictured here. And this is a safe space for BIPOC creators to gather together and coalesce. I think it's a podcast as well, but he also runs his Twitch channel. And again, when we looked at where brands outside of the space were tapping into this, there really weren't a ton of kind of streaming specific examples. One of the good ones that we did see was Epic Games, which is the developer for Fortnite. They ran an in-game event last year called We the People, which was all around anti-racism off the back of George Floyd's death. a year ago yesterday, in fact. And so we are seeing that gaming brands are doing a little bit in this space, but broadly speaking, there's a huge opportunity for brands outside of gaming space to be targeting these very underserved consumers. Next, while the comments are integral to the content, as we've seen, bullying and harassment is rife. It's a paradox, says Fabian, because we have this toxic male culture in gaming that contradicts this punk hacker culture that is about creating an environment where everyone is welcome. And we see this constantly still happening. If you consider that Gamergate happened over 5 years ago now, it's not new information for anyone that bullying and harassment is rife, but not a lot is being done about it. Like even recently, Corpse Husband released a track called E-Girls Are Ruining My Life on Spotify, which surpassed 100 million streams not too long ago. And this was all about basically being like, women are ruining my space online. Like that was literally like the base level message that we're talking to here. And we're seeing this play out in tons of different ways, some of which are, again, really heavy going and difficult, and some of which are, even on the most lightweight, make streamers' lives really hard. So last year we saw a ton of streamers, including Jasmine, who's pictured here, come out around sexual harassment on the platform, leading to a 24-hour Twitch blackout with a ton of different streamers. Then on the flip side of that, we've seen Fusely, who's a really, really popular GTA 5 RP player. She actually had to take a break not because people were sexually harassing her necessarily, but simply because they just wouldn't stop telling her how bad she was at playing the game. So it comes back down to this idea of easy mode shaming, this idea of not letting people enjoy the gameplay, which is really what this is all about. Once again, in terms of brand examples, what we're seeing here is that there are a ton of not-for-profit initiatives. There are a ton of, kind of wider charitable initiatives around this, but in terms of brands actually getting into this space and doing something to protect and resonate with these communities, there's very little going on. Riot Games is one great example. They're the developer for League of Legends, but this particular activation, well, it's not an activation, this particular function that they've just brought in for AI voice chat moderation is on a game called Valorant. So again, trying to hold people accountable and kind of make sure that they're actually kind of behaving themselves on these streams. And finally, creators are the main event, but burnout is a growing problem. And this really taps into this broader narrative you've obviously seen around kind of healthier social media usage. But Tyler Blevins, aka Ninja, says that the longest vacation he's ever taken was his honeymoon, and that it was only 6 days. It was devastating. It was a calculated risk. So what we're seeing here is that streamers really they have to constantly be on. They have to be doing super long streams. Some of them are so long. The guy on the right here, Ludwig Agren, he is one of a number of people who kind of does subathons, which is where you stay online for a super long time and you incentivize people to follow you essentially. And he did a 31-day subathon. That's 31 days where he did not turn his live stream off at any point. And this is really normal behavior. Some streamers actually train where they'll just sleep for 2.5 hours a night to get to this point. So there are some really unhealthy habits that come from these kind of really intense expectations that have only been magnified during lockdowns. As a result of this, we're seeing a lot of famous streamers take public burnout breaks. Pokimane and Valkyrie both, after lockdowns, had to take a break because of how intense it was. We've got Twitch psychologist Dr. K. He's become super famous for gaming with other really famous gamers and actually talking about how they're kind of instilling healthier habits into their lives. And then pharmaceutical brand Excedrin has done a great job of getting into this space. They said obviously they sell a lot of headache tablets and all of this kind of stuff, but they actually announced a mindful gaming campaign in which they basically work with a ton of different streamers to encourage healthy habits, long rest times, and so on. So really kind of obvious and natural fit for a healthcare brand there. Fab.
Cool. So yeah, I'm just going to do a quick recap. So cultural truths. So basically, what are the top 3 takeaways from there? The first one is that interaction is essential. So you need to facilitate that where possible. We had that phrase earlier that was without comments, there is no content. Streamers really vibe off their community, engaging with them. So you need to think about that when you are developing your campaigns on live streaming platforms. The second thing is that viewers are seduced by skill. So it's important to try and encourage the stream to have some kind of challenge element to it. They want to see people performing better, trying to achieve things that they haven't done before. Thirdly, gamers always root for the underdog. So you need to give underdogs a platform. I think this is really important for this audience mindset, just trying to understand that you can't just push a specific message in there without addressing that kind of perspective. So they were the cultural truths from the platforms and the audiences, and then cultural tensions. So I think it's quite clear that these cultural tensions are things that are bubbling up in communities and societies probably outside of gaming, but are manifesting themselves through the expectations and behaviours that the audiences have of these platforms. So the first one is that diversity remains a contentious issue. So trying to elevate marginalised voices is a really potentially good avenue to play in, to try and support those groups. It taps in quite nicely to that underdog story, and having that kind of openness as a key part of your campaign could be really, really relevant. The second one would be that bullying and harassment is really rife. So we've actually done some thought leadership in the past about how to deal with trolls, how to deal with abuse online, and it is something that is rampant behind keyboards. People don't really get held to account. So trying to think about how you can play a positive role in holding those people to account is a really great opportunity, I think, based off that tension. And then finally, creator burnout. And obviously with the pandemic, with so much conversation about mental health, with so much additional stress on people over the last couple of years, burnout is a problem, and mental health is so important to people, and specifically young people at the moment. So trying to promote that healthy habits rest could be a really nice place for your brands to play in, if of course it is relevant for them. So what comes next? If you're looking to get into this space, really we're at the core of it. It doesn't get more social than live streaming. It's all about that interaction. As we said at the beginning, live streaming gaming is effectively the biggest social channel in the world right now. We really do live in this world. We've got a whole host of people who engage in streaming, stream for themselves, and we've worked with a large number of the biggest gaming companies in the world. So we live in this world. So we are also trying to really push forward marketing and putting social at the front of it. So we want to use gaming as a real potential avenue to help us deliver and really do some really amazing forward-thinking work. So if you want to do that work, please get in touch with us. You can reach out to us or Alice, who was taking registrations. We'd love to help you or your brands get involved in live streaming. So obviously we covered a lot there. I know that a number of people have put questions forwards. So I'm going to put some questions to Laura and myself. The first one is, Laura, as social causes and politicians flock to Twitch, is there a risk of the platform regulating content more strictly? And do you think that there are or will handle content moderation better than other platforms? So do you think that Twitch will handle content moderation better than other platforms?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I definitely think we're going to see a big shift in this space. I don't know whether you saw it, depending on where you jumped in, but one of the emergent platforms that John mentioned was DLive. So DLive in particular was created almost as like the 4chan of live streaming. It felt that even Twitch and the other platforms were too regulated. And so I think we're going to see the same polarization happen in live streaming that we have done on other social platforms, right? Which is where some people will be like, even this is not moderated enough. Other people will say it's too much. I think all platforms will struggle the same. I think Twitch in particular does have a struggle because its core existing community has been quite monolithic. As it diversifies and continues to diversify, there will always be a friction there. And it will totally depend on who they have on board to do it. But I don't think they will be better or worse. I think one of the fascinating things about content moderation and what is considered censorship and what isn't, no matter how much research and resource you pour into it, it's basically impossible to please everyone. I guess the only thing with Twitch that is more interesting is that hopefully like the gamers do, obviously because it's voice based, do have a bit more kind of freedom to say what they want to in their channels. So I think that makes it different than say Facebook or Twitter.
I think also it's worth noting that community moderation is quite an important thing as well. Twitch streamers often set their own expectations of their community's behaviours. You see it in places like Discord as well. You know, there are rules and things for groups that people can participate in, and the communities that themselves really have a really important role to play in, you know, fostering the positive world that they want to live in. So it's something to bear in mind as well. And when you're looking to work with people, try and find people who have that kind of
don't have
when you're working with them.
Yeah, it's so true. So heartwarming to see that as well. Like just like people in the chat doing clapbacks without the influencers even having to do anything.
Exactly. Cool. So yeah, quick one. This one. So yeah, is YouTube the top place to go to watch live streams versus watching them live in the game on Twitch? So yeah, we covered that earlier in the presentation. Twitch still probably the biggest with 65%. The presentation we've done has been recorded. It will be sent around, as will the deck. So if you missed that or anything else, we will get that back to you as soon as we can.
I think sorry, just quickly on that though, I do think that it's worth noting that the view hours, like the numbers on YouTube, do tend to be bigger just because YouTube is a bigger platform. And when YouTube collates its numbers, it doesn't just look at live streams, it looks at like all views of Minecraft videos, for example. So I think in terms of like literal figures, YouTube is bigger, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most engaged place for gamers specifically. And as John mentioned, if you just look at live streamed hours, then it is still Twitch.
Cool. Next one is, what rules do Twitch currently have about creators revealing when content is sponsored? I would say that really, you know, all of these platforms are dictated by the behaviors of brands on there are dictated by the ASA. So Twitch has, you know, expectations of that kind of thing. And there are loads of different ways that brands can get involved, but really you guys should be finding where you feel comfortable with your legal teams. You know, I would recommend that you do call out when it's a partnership, it's a paid partnership, when your brands are doing it, and normally that's in the title of the stream or in you know, the header of the stream. So that's kind of what I would recommend, is just making sure that, as with other influencer marketing, you're applying that same kind of rigor and thinking, because the one thing that, you know, this community don't want is to be lied to. They don't want to have underhand or brands trying to sneak in without it being like a really open dialogue.
Sorry, just on that as well, they do have a number of kind of influencer-centric guidelines as well. I think at the moment what's very interesting in this space is that so they even have guidelines in terms of how they can control. So, you know, start with 1 minute of ads per hour, for example. So the influencer has quite a lot of control over how and when ads are put in their channels. But I think it's more about thinking about like the topics that these ads are involving as well. There are a ton of influencer-based guidelines, which I assume will be kind of dictated by the ASA. But then it's also a tonal thing. So Amazon running anti-union ads, for example, is a good example of the ad itself being quite anti a relatively kind of left-leaning audience, I guess.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so one more question. So love the Uber Eats Twitch campaign. Thank you very much. How did you ensure that the Twitch community didn't just reject a corporate company coming onto their platform like TL suggests? It seemed like it was well received, yet lots of fast food brands have had big backlashes after their Twitch campaigns.
Yeah, I think lots of fast food campaigns have had big backlashes, but actually it's kind of not. So I know someone else mentioned this, the Burger King backlash that came after they kind of hacked the channel. So basically the ad was that Burger King was paying like $1 to get the creators and influencers to say stuff about Burger King. So it's essentially very cheap advertising. And that seems like an obvious faux pas. You're not working with the community, you're trying to trick the community. You're not working with the influencers, you're kind of coming in as a third party. For the Uber Eats campaign, we worked with creators. We were championing the underdog, which is, you know, an insight into gamer culture, which is very true. And then we were using in-platform functions as they are supposed to be used. So I think, you know, understanding the platforms, understanding the culture, picking the right figureheads, these are all like the bread and butter of good social marketing on any platform. And I think that's, you know, that's the best way to do it. I think it's just taking the time to make sure you really understand the community and the ways in, rather than with that Burger King example where they were like, oh, it would be really funny and clever. And you could tell that that campaign was very much an example of marketers impressing other marketers rather than impressing the audience they actually wanted to impress, right? That being said, though, I will say on Burger King that they are also responsible for some of the best live streaming campaigns. So yeah, it's a funny one. I think there's backlash if something annoys people, but you won't necessarily be blacklisted from the community either.
Yeah, cool. So it's 10 o'clock. We'll do one final question. Thanks for everyone who put forward other questions, some really good ones in there. I don't have time to go through all of them, unfortunately. But yeah, so final question. Do you think that the prominence of gaming will reduce as the world gets back to normal? Is it worth brands holding off placing a significant part of their marketing budget in gaming as a result?
I think people will obviously spend less time in games, but you know, youth audiences, I think when you're younger, often you have more time to spend on screens. And so if your audience is a youth audience or you want to acquire a younger audience, there will always be an opportunity in gaming. I think as well, there are a lot of grown-ups who either just game because they love it, or game for the comfort and nostalgia it brings them, or the mindfulness it gives them, which is something in an extremely anxious and turbulent world we need more now than ever. I think the dwell time will go down, but I don't think that the usage will go down. And I also think that it just makes there's just so much creative opportunity there. It's great for if you need like to make a splash, or you know, something big and PRable that will get heard and get seen. Like it's such an exciting space for that.
Yeah, good answer. I think one thing I would add to that point that Laura made was that the pandemic really has been an accelerant to a lot of different things in terms of, you know, D2C, but also it's accelerated the uptake of technology. And I think now live streaming in particular has become like du jour, really. Like people use live streaming for far more things than they used to before. And I think if you look at music, people would say they wouldn't watch like sets being live streamed. They watch that now. It's become a really common thing. And whilst, yes, probably time on games will reduce, what's happened is that it's become a commonplace thing. And whilst it maybe, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago, it was just the young audiences who were going to watch Twitch and live stream, I think what we've seen is an acceleration of a much broader audience becoming engaged with it. So that's the only thing I'd add. So it's 3 minutes past 10, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you all found it useful. As we said, we'll send around the presentation and all of the other bits that we can, recording of this presentation as well. So I hope you enjoyed it, and do feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions.
Amazing. Thank you. Have a great day.
Cheers.
Bye.